just before we get going, I just wanted to let everybody know about the upcoming symposium we have on the 20th, actually no, it's the 9th of November now. Friday the 9th of November, the TIU is holding a symposium. I know a few of you here have put in abstracts already. Thanks, Deb. And if you haven't, please go ahead and register to attend on the day. I'll send a link out to everybody who is registered for this. But just to let you know, there's a teaching and learning symposium coming up for UniSA staff on the 9th of November. So we're really looking forward to that. Excuse me. So before we get going, I'd like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respect to elders both past and present. So we're very excited this morning. We've broken a registration record with our registrations for this, and there's a fairly full room this morning. I'm really happy to welcome our colleagues from the UniSA College. Jennifer Stokes, John Pike, Levi George, Cameron McTernan, and Rebecca Godwin, and they're going to speak to us this morning on the full topic I can't see, but I'm sure Jenny will take it. So over to you, Jennifer Stokes.
Thanks, Stuart. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people here today in the room and so many people online. We just thought we'd start, as always seems to be the challenge with technology. We love technology, but there's some issues with the YouTube sound from our video clip. So there's a couple of pictures here just to show the sort of work that students have done, some of the impressive work from 2017 students. This was an augmented reality game that a student created called Reality Shift. He's gone on, I think, to study cybersecurity and IT. And another student doing a first-person shooter, so using Unity to create that. A couple of comments here as well, just showing the impact of the type of work we're doing. And if you're interested, there's a link and also a QR code there that you can have a look at some examples of student work. So we'll get into the presentation. Oops. Oh, there we go. We'll get into the presentation for today. But before we do that, I'd really like everyone in the team to introduce themselves and note what they bring to the team, because one of the real strengths of what we do is that everyone's got these different abilities and strengths.
I'm John Pike. I'm a PhD student doing a PhD on media discourses of digital games, and I've been teaching at UniSA for quite some time now at the School of Creative Industries, at the college, and with UniSA online as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Levi George. I've been teaching animation for a few years and have recently joined the digital literacy team. I teach future ideas and introduction to digital media online and digital media project 1 online.
Hi, I'm Cameron McTernan. I specialise in media communications and I've been working at the university about 4 years now.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Godwin. I'm just walking, so I'm in the camera. Awkward. I teach at the School of Creative Industries as well, and also work with Jenny here at UniSA College and do some work with UniSA online. My background is in media arts and a bit of communications as well.
Okay, thank you. Can hold on to that mic, I've got mine. So everyone in this team teaches in undergraduate, also teaches at UniSA College, and also has contributed to UniSA Online, so whether that's in content development or teaching in that space as well. So lots of different expertise. So I guess the first thing that I think it's worth thinking about the context is, why did we create this course? What was it aiming to do? Part of it is thinking about our students, so particularly the students we're teaching this year, a lot of them born in the year 2000. So they're post-millennial students and they're existing in this really immersive screen-based world. We also need to think about the context of automation. So what are the types of skill sets that are going to help students stand out in this space? So one of the key guiding questions was, how do we best prepare our students for tomorrow's challenges? So what are some of the things that we can do to assist them? Around the time that we were designing and delivering this course for the first time, so it was designed end of 2014 and delivered in 2015, this sort of research was coming out from the Foundation for Young Australians, looking at the digital literacy needs and arguing in the next 2 to 5 years that Australia really needed to step up its skill base. So, as they say here, more than 90% of Australia's current workforce will need to be at least a digital citizen to perform their roles in a digitally enabled economy. But how are our students learning this, and where were they getting these skills in ways that were going to help them as professionals as well as citizens? Then some of the other future-proofing skills that they needed to help them stand out in that context of automation or around artificial intelligence may sometimes be referred to as soft skills, and I'm sure people across these, but things like creative intelligence, empathy, confidence, social intelligence, all of these different sorts of abilities. Fast forwarding a couple of years, and this is further research that's come out from the Foundation for Young Australians, who argue that digital literacy is a core transferable skill that's essentially needed across most careers now. And it aligns really well with 21st century skills. So these are the types of things we're really trying to teach students in the digital literacy course and also in future ideas, which is kind of its sister course at the college. So a big question for us was, is our teaching meeting these learning needs? And if not, how can we shift it to support the students? Further complicating this is the idea of enabling programs and what Hodges et al. Refer to as extreme heterogeneity. So we have open access programs, so that means that students come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and it's this second chance for them to be supported to earn a GPA for undergraduate study. What does that actually mean for the teacher though? Well, if we see that enabling programs are characterised by diversity, then the enabling educator has to work to extend the advanced students and really support them, while also supporting students who may have much more limited experience. So we're needing to design things in ways that are responsive to the diversity of students that we're teaching. So particularly reiterating content and building confidence to engage students who often have had quite negative previous educational experiences too. So some of the design approaches that we took, firstly thinking about the need for digital professionals and citizens, so very closely aligned with the digital learning strategy which came out in 2015 at UniSA. Looking at increasingly diverse students, and universal design learning then became a key design approach we used. And thinking about contemporary students, so I'm sure all of us are familiar with Prensky's work around the turn of the century, talking about digital natives and digital immigrants. But then he moved towards this idea of digital wisdom, that it doesn't matter at what point we engage with the digital world, but how well are we using it? So that's something we aim to do. So thinking about how do we embed these approaches to create really inclusive and engaging teaching experiences for all students. This is the point where I'd love to show this clip, but the link for this clip will be sent around to everyone. And so it captures some really nice feedback from students, some of the work they're creating and how it aligns with their undergraduate degree aspirations, where they're planning on going, and how they use those digital tools to connect with that space. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, we'll take you through a few different sections. I'm going to talk about background, design, and inclusive assessment. Then I'll hand over to the team who are going to talk about the connections and how this course fits in the bigger picture. So connections to industry, research, undergraduate degrees, and also future skills. So how are we preparing students? Then we'll come back to me for outcomes and recommendations. So if we think about the course background, what were we trying to do? And particularly originally it was Beck, Cam and I who started teaching the course in 2015. So one of the important things for us was it was about attitude, not about money. So how do we help students to make things with devices they're familiar with? And at the start, it was very much kind of guerrilla filmmaking. So what is the free software? What are the tools they already have? And how can they use those to create professional content? And it's also about learning together. So a lot of the software we're using, it's right at the cutting edge. So if students are using things like Unity or Adobe Experience Design, often those things are just coming out. So we're all working out how do we learn together to use these new technologies. Our team works to support a collaborative production environment. So as you heard, all of us are bringing different strengths. So that means that perhaps if a student in one of Cam's classes has a question about film, then he might send them to me. Or if a student in one of my classes has a particular question about web, then Beck would be the person I would hit up. So we kind of work together and we model that collaborative production practice. I also think this approach is really important, that it's a production hub, so it's a chance for the students to fly or fail with support. So we're encouraging them to have really big ideas. They only have about a month to actually produce their projects. But in the model of things like a cat mole from Pixar, who says you need to be able to try, you need to be able to fail, because how do you ever create innovation? How do you ever create new things if you don't take those chances? So we support students to be able to give big ideas a go. And if you can't do that at university, where else can you do it? So we really try to design things to be meaningful and fun, so the students are really strongly engaged with what they're doing. It's also about embracing technology. And it's grounded in enabling pedagogy. So this is the space I'm doing my PhD in at the moment. So that focuses on things like inclusive approaches, supported transition, and employing critical pedagogy to empower students as those really kind of active citizens and active digital citizens in our case. It's also about changing the conversation. So we look at multimodal literacy. So moving away from essays and other text-based formats to what are other ways that students could communicate these ideas and share them with other people. It's about lifelong learning and complex tasks. So we know that students starting a degree now may well end up somewhere different in careers we haven't imagined in 4 or 5 years' time. So how do we help them to continually upskill and to be those types of lifelong learners? And we also acknowledge students feel comfortable in these digital spaces. So this very much connecting with things like Freire's ideas of learning to read the word through a reading of the world. So looking at the world around them, being able to apply academic concepts to that, and being able to apply analysis and critique. Many of these students already construct knowledge in these digital spaces throughout their lives. So we try to respect that, but also then to connect that to university skill bases and academic literacies. We're aware of equity groups and the specific needs that those students may bring and ways we can help support them to engage fully with what will be their undergraduate pathway. We provide production support, so we've written specific guides that we update every year for the key types of formats. And as the course has gone on, we were lucky to receive 2 grants from the Teaching Innovation Unit, which was the Digital Teaching Equipment Fund, and that's really allowed students to lift their game in terms of what they're creating. So we have 360-degree cameras, we have Adobe Creative Cloud, iPad kits. Can we see anything? Don't think so. So this just gave a bit more material for the students to be able to use. So rather than drawing on the resources they had, there was then more production support. It is undergraduate level content, and we do use an undergraduate textbook, but we work through with students how to interpret this, how to deal with new language and these sorts of things. We look at their skill sets against automation and how they can differentiate and how they can hone things like creativity to be able to stand out and be successful in this space. And it's about co-creating knowledge. So some of the examples of work students create, which when you have a look at the video, you'll see some of the fantastic stuff they do, is really about bringing in these diverse knowledges to the academy and seeing what new projects can be created as a result. So in terms of design principles, I'm sure some of you may have seen this image. Stuart and I did some work, and I think it was about 2013, 2014, where we were looking at universal design learning and thinking about some of the issues with the standardised format of education that students may go through, particularly in the secondary education sector. For a lot of the students that come through the college, that experience has not worked very well for them. So it's about thinking, well, what are the kind of threshold concepts? What are the learning outcomes we need to see? And what might be diverse ways that students can express those? So universal design learning, many of you in this room may already be familiar with this concept and that it comes originally from architecture. But for people that aren't or just want a refresher, this is a really nice example of a universally designed staircase. So preemptively, the designer has thought about anyone that might access that staircase, and so if someone is in a wheelchair, if someone's pushing a pram, they can still get up there fine. Other people can choose to use the stairs if they want to, but the design has come before the use of the object. So universal design for learning has then been adopted into education as an approach where we can think about some key ways to design content so that it can support all sorts of students, which, particularly in the context of widening participation, is really important. So CAST have done some great work around this, and as this slide's saying, these types of pedagogies are an acknowledgement that students, regardless of their background, bring a diversity of approaches, backgrounds and expectations to higher education. So UDL offers a method to teach effectively, not just equity groups, but all students based on 3 central principles of curriculum design. And I think you find this is a little bit of a running theme, that these things aren't just for equity students, but they actually improve learning for all students. So they're a really positive thing to engage students with. It's about providing multiple means of representation and allowing students choice within that as to what works best for them, providing multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. How does this play out in our actual course design? Well, firstly, the course is presented in multiple modes. So a simple example being that students can choose between coming to the on-campus lecture, or they can complete the virtual lecture with interactive elements online. Just an example here of what the course website looks like, and a couple of lecturettes that I've created there at the top. So you can see it's very visually driven, so it's quite a different setup, but made to be quite simple and easy to use, while also reflecting a kind of production workflow. We encourage students to bring their own device so that they can actually use things like phones and iPads in the lecture to engage with the content. And we use learning catalytics, but you could use any other type of interactive audience polling. And what this does is it gets the students to test their knowledge continuously throughout the lecture. And it is a 2-hour lecture, so I work really hard to make that an interactive experience. What we do is inclusive, and it has a constructivist design. So we're valuing students' funds of knowledge. So simple example here, when we're looking at camera work and composition, having some shots from Game of Thrones so that they can go, that's familiar text. I can see how in modern media, these types of skill bases are still being used. So they're aware of the text, but we're applying it to the university skills. We also use critical pedagogy using a dialogic approach, and I really like this quote because I think it speaks to what we need to do as educators when we're working in the context of such diversity. To understand our students, we really need to know them individually. So working with them through dialogue to understand where they're coming from, where they're aiming to go to, and how we can best support that. And we focus on blended learning and innovative practice. So the actual course design itself, well, if you weren't sure what digital literacies are, I think this quote captures it quite nicely, and it's from the textbook that we use. So we have a 2-hour tutorial and a 2-hour lecture per week. We focus on contemporary issues, so things that emerge from spaces like creative industries, things like new media, film and games. We look at online identities, ethics and technical production. Our topics connect with a much broader base of things though. So looking at digital literacy and related literacies, so things like critical literacy, information literacy. We look at web fundamentals, narrative, semiotics, creativity, neuroplasticity, particularly to encourage people to understand and adopt a growth mindset towards intellectual development. Design, industry practice, production process, copyright and ethics. Part of this as well is about encouraging students to develop academic literacies, so we're very strongly connected to university systems and using those to introduce the students to the university. And in terms of the way assessment has been structured, there's constructive alignment between the content and the assessment, so designed very clearly throughout the course, alongside embedding student choice, which is designed to encourage deep learning approaches. And then just quickly, inclusive assessment design. So what are they actually doing? Because I think this is often where the rubber hits the road for universal design learning, working out how can we create assessments in ways that provide students those opportunities and choice, but still allow them to demonstrate their learning to the standard that we want to see for them to move through the course. So the first assessment is 25%, and it's a quiz and it's done in class. 40% of that is based on foundational concepts. So by the time they complete that part, we can be satisfied as educators that they have the basics of digital literacy down. Then they do an image analysis, and this is where they can show in much greater detail their critical analysis skills, their understanding of mise-en-scène, composition, these sorts of things. But what's important is the students are able to select their own image from a bank of provided images. So this element of choice is really encouraging for them, and again it helps them, I guess, take some ownership of what they're doing and get more excited You can see just in that image there, it's an example from a Star Wars film, and this student has correctly identified how this depiction of the stormtroopers is drawing upon the kind of visual history of things like the Nuremberg rallies. Students then do a project pitch. So that after they've got the foundational stuff down, they then need to work on designing their own project and pitching it to the class. They have a maximum of 5 minutes and 3 content slides. So it's quite restrained in terms of the amount of content they're presenting, but the focus is on industry practice. So they need to come up with their unique concept. They present a synopsis, format and content. They provide their context because we really emphasise that they need to be creating work that has a particular audience base. So they have aims, audience, and how they will do this legally within copyright. And then the logistics. So how will they actually create this work in a 1-month period? We also get students to do peer review. So this really, I guess the public nature of the pitch helps set a public benchmark for quality, and the students doing the peer review helps them understand assessment and how that is articulated for other people. Also, I guess we use a real model which comes from Vincent Tinto's work, which is about setting the bar high and providing students support to achieve that point. So the pitch is often where students will express these big ideas, and with the academics will give them feedback as to how to make that manageable within the time frame. And then the last 2 assessments, the project delivery, which is an artefact and exegesis, and also participation. So the artefact and exegesis is where we really see these multimodal choices come into play. So students can design an app, a website, create a short film, create an infographic or a critical digital media review, or they can negotiate a project. So if they've got a digital artefact that they'd like to create, then this is the time where they can present that in their pitch, discuss it with their tutor, and if it's manageable, be supported to create it. So games have been something we've seen a real growth in since 2015. At the start, we had students creating more things with RPG Maker and those sorts of more basic games, whereas now we're seeing more students creating things with Unity, which is professional standard game design engine. Students have done things like podcasts, virtual reality and augmented reality content. So it's about the student defining what they see a need for, where they see they can create something different that has an audience, and us supporting them to realise that over time. And we see the students are really challenged and they're inspired to deliver high quality work, so they take real pride in what they do and what they create. And what I've found particularly interesting as an educator, and I've been lecturing for I guess about 16 years now, so quite a time, is this is a course where the student evaluations consistently say the assessments are fun, which is not usual feedback I've found for assessments. So really quite charming that they're enjoying it so much that even though it's challenging them, they're finding it fun to do it. So it demonstrates that empowering aspect of assessment choice and how that helps facilitate an enjoyable educational experience. So these are some of the examples in our first year of teaching of the types of things students were making. So for example, a student that was a recent migrant to Australia created a film in his first language and then subtitled it for accessibility and shared it via YouTube. A student who created a shop site and showcase for a tattoo artist that was a friend of his, so as a business site. A student who created the wireframe navigation for an app, which was called SkateMate, so about finding and rating skating locations around Adelaide. An infographic, which was based on plastics in the oceans, and then a comparative critical digital media review between Sims 3 and 4. One thing we've done with the assessment is there's slightly different research criteria for students, say, who do an infographic and a critical digital media review, where they have to explicitly state their research, because arguably through the students creating the films, creating apps, and creating websites, the research is coming in through the construction for them to be able to deliver that product. So that was something we negotiated and determined in the grading rubrics, so the students know what they're being assessed on. Oh, and I'll hand over to Levi.
No, I don't, but that's all right. I'll make it work. Hi everyone, I'm Levi. I'm one of the newer members of the digital literacy team. When I'm not working here, I also run an animation studio called Awesome Fighter Animation. We create content for SA Health. We've made something for MTV and Sesame Street. So I've been working as a freelancer for a little while. So what I work is I work in what's called the gig economy, which means that you often have 2 or 3 projects all happening at the same time. And this taught me a really important lesson about working in digital media, and that's you have to be a good artist, but you also have to be an entrepreneur. There's so many skills that you need to actually be successful in digital media, and I thought I'd talk about some of the ways that the digital literacy program actually prepares students to work in an industry like this. So, this is a very important slide. So living in the digital age means that things are constantly changing, be it the workplace or language and communication. I've spent a lot of energy trying to figure out what this word means. I've looked it up. I've asked people. I don't know. If any of you know, please tell me after the presentation. But online information has changed a lot. It changed from like big walls of text into videos. It's presented as images, Instagrams, tweets, Vines, GIFs. The way people communicate online is much more creative. There's a language to it, and teaching students to deconstruct that language is really important for their communication abilities in the future. That should say visual language, but use your imaginations. One of the early skills we teach is deconstructing visual language. We start with films. That includes identifying cinematography, shot composition, mise-en-scène. And as Jenny said, we have them find, we present them with some images from some contemporary films, and we have them analyze these and deconstruct what the intended audience effect of them is. Later in Future Ideas, one of the other courses, we take a similar approach to memes, but we get students to focus less on the visual components of a meme and more on the social context of a meme. That should have come up a second ago. I really don't like the word yeet, you guys. It's going to come up several times. Creativity. The other thing that we teach in this course is creativity. It's a tool that's essential when you're working as an artist, but it's also becoming more and more sought after in nearly every other industry. Why? Well, that brings me to my next slide and a question many of us might have thought about very late at night. Will a robot take my job? The answer is maybe. If you're curious, there's a website called willrobotstakemyjob.com. I went through it, and there's a 1% chance that it'll take my job as a tutor and a 2% chance it'll take my job as an animator. So I'm pretty safe. I think that's a 0.002% chance. So everyone relax, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be employed well into the future unless this presentation goes very poorly. Next slide. Is it poor form to laugh at your own joke in the middle of a presentation? So why am I going to be fine? The answer is because robots cannot be creative, but luckily humans can. Creativity isn't just for artists, it's just a fancy word for problem solving and can be applied across all fields. In DigiLit, we spend some time talking about creative thinking. That includes brainstorming, mind mapping, and we even use Lego for idea generation, which is something that Cam is going to speak about in a little bit. So this brings us to another important skill. Pitching an idea. So the ability to clearly communicate what's good about a creative idea is almost as important as the idea itself. So I work in the animation field and I'm constantly pitching ideas to clients and things like that. But the hard part is convincing a client that your idea is actually a good idea. So right now I'm pitching to a client and I want to have an image of a heart having a heart attack. And you only get one shot really to pitch an idea. So I could write it down in an email, I could say it to them, but that's not really going to have the effect that I want because, like I said, we're living in a very visual world now. So it's much better to stand up in front of people, tell them the idea, and show them a picture of a heart having a heart attack. If that pitch goes well, you'll see that online somewhere next month. So we really try to teach students how important it is to pitch an idea with enthusiasm, use visuals, and be excited about that idea. That's the second assessment. The other important skill is self-directed tasks and learning. So when you start off working in digital media, chances are you're going to be what's called a freelancer. That means you have a few jobs coming in, you kind of are self-directed, people will just outsource work to you. And that means you get to be your own boss. And that sounds great until you realize that your new boss can still be really, really unorganized and make you work really, really late. So for the final assignment, we get students to build their creative projects. We get them to design their own schedule, create soft deadlines, identify their strengths and potential problems that could come up when they're working on their project. But for the rest of the time, they're mostly self-directed. They come to us for like various expertise while they're working on the assessment. But it's really important that they develop the skills to actually like develop new skills they might need to develop their project, or they have to be able to stick to their deadlines and things like that. I think the final slide is just empty, but so this year my students did some really impressive stuff. I sadly could not show any of them today, but one of my students made a really cool horror movie. I'm a big horror nerd, so that was very exciting for me. Another person made an app that showed the potential dangers of drug use. Another student made a documentary about killer whales. So I got some really, really cool assessments, and it was impressive seeing how the students went from generating the idea, pitching the idea, and then actually realizing that idea and sharing it with everyone. Digital literacies has been a really great course to be a part of so far. The ability to deconstruct language, think, and solve problems using creative thinking, having the skills and confidence to pitch an idea and have the discipline and organization to actually make that idea happen. I'm really happy to see the skills that students are learning in this course, and I think it's going to lead them to a lot of success in the gig economy or whatever kind of economy they graduate into. That is all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk briefly about how digital literacy introduces students to the academic world. So a really important aspect in this regard is that students are already engaging with digital media in creative ways and often very complex ways. An example that really sticks in my mind is a student from this year who runs his YouTube channel. He has about 3,000 subscribers, has about 450,000 total views on his channel, and mostly what he posts there are film reviews. So this student's already making his own kind of digital media. He's already critiquing media texts, and he's doing this for a sizable audience already. So this student in digital literacy went on to make his own short film, so he was kind of putting into practice what he had been critiquing, and he learned a lot from that process. So this course acknowledges that the skills and the knowledge and the forms of cultural capital that students already have are valuable and encourages them to build on those. So students through the projects that they create can see that university is not this strange and intimidating place, but it's, their projects kind of make this relatable connection to the academic world. So throughout the course and in assessments, students also grow accustomed to deepening their critical thinking skills by engaging with academic literature. So for example, this student here, the image on the right there, did a film review of the film Her. So this student, through digital literacy, developed the critical vocabulary to be able to analyse this film and engaged with academic literature to sort of critique the film in a broader social context. So you can see they focused on the use of technology and issues of loneliness and social isolation. This student has now gone on to do a media arts degree, I think, yeah. Okay, so he found this whole process really useful as well. Now, another student, another example in this regard is the student from this year who created an infographic. It was about kind of advanced prosthetic technology. Now, this student is planning to go on to do nursing, so there was kind of that connection there. But the student also has an interest in science fiction, so she created this infographic by bringing together those interests, and she made it in the style of a futuristic biotech company that's marketing its products to people. And as part of that project, she engaged really deeply with academic research on prosthetic technology. So that project was really interesting, and it brought together the students' own interests. It brought together academic literature, science fiction tropes, a knowledge of visual design, marketing discourse, and she brought all this together and made this project that was academically very rigorous, but it was also driven entirely by her own interests. So she had a lot of control over that project and a lot of investment in it. So students finish digital literacy seeing that their own skills and knowledge are valued, and they kind of belong in the academic world, and they also see that academia is something that's relevant to them and useful for them.
Yep.
Okay, so I just want to quickly talk about how this links into undergraduate study. There's kind of 4 key things that I really love about this course and that I think are really valuable, thanks Cam, really valuable for students in terms of engagement and in terms of their learning outcomes. So obviously digital productions is the big one, right? So obviously we talk about millennials and post-millennials loving technology, always being on their phones and that kind of thing. And it's one thing to kind of cater to what students want, but it's another thing to make sure that it's really going to be relevant to what they need when they graduate. And obviously a digital world is going to be huge for them as graduates, so making sure that they develop these skills is really worthwhile for us. Having digital projects means that students also have a lot of flexibility in what kind of projects they choose. And I don't really know if this came across as clearly to you as I would have liked it to, but when students are kind of told about their final projects and their final assessments in this course, the kind of question that is given to them is, what do you want to do for your final assessment? It's not a list of here's a choice of things you get to pick from. It's like, you get to build something here. What do you want to make? And they all just kind of look at us like, what do you mean? We're like, you can make anything you want as long as it's kind of digital and we'll help you get there. All right, so they have this really kind of open-ended choice, and that's what Jenny was talking about in terms of getting the students to aim really high, so that when they deliver their project pitches to us, often they have aimed really high and we need to say, this is an awesome idea. You're not going to be able to get there in a month, but let's see what we can actually help you achieve within that month. So I think this kind of idea around project-based learning, and my next one's going to say element of choice, it's all really interconnected. So the project-based learning is really useful in this course and in all courses, I would say, because what that does is means the assessments have some kind of relevance to them. So relevant to students' interests, where they have the element of choice, but also relevance to the real world, right? They're not just like writing some random essay about something they have to learn for university. They are solving problems, real world problems. Like I have a friend who's a tattoo artist, he needs a website. All right, solve that problem, let's make that, right? We have a problem of plastics in the ocean, what can we do about it, right? Make an infographic. So they have this real kind of drive because the assessments mean something to them and they know that it actually means something in the greater context of the world. So what they're delivering is something really meaningful, and I keep using that word, right? Because it's something that has significance to them and significance to the world around them, which is excellent. So yeah, real world relevance. So in terms of my undergraduate teaching, I have tried to bring in this stuff as much as possible because I'm in media arts and communications. Yes, the digital production is obviously relevant, but the project-based learning is a big thing. So instead of me thinking, okay, I'm allowed to have 3 assessments per year, I need to test this, this, and this to make sure they're getting the objectives, I've really worked hard to think about how can I give them real world projects. So for one of my courses, it's called Digital Design Essentials. This year I've kind of flipped a little bit and I've given them 5 client project briefs to choose from. The 5th choice is choose your own adventure, okay? But one of the 4 client briefs is the potential merger that's been talked about between UniSA and Adelaide Uni. So for this assignment, the students need to come up with brandings and names and logos for their client. So there's some really cool ideas. The winner so far is Light University. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I've told these students that if the merger goes ahead, that some of them really actually need to pitch these ideas. All right, so because they can see that real world relevance, that this is a real merger that's being talked about, they understand that these projects have meaning. So it takes away that whole kind of question around like, what is the point of this assignment? Like, why am I even doing this? Because it's really clear to them why they're doing it, because there's that direct relevance. So that relevance is really great for them to understand the kind of scope of the assessment, to help them to pitch really high in terms of the kind of outcomes they want, but it also drives their kind of investment and their engagement as well. So I find it really useful. I've found it really useful to try and implement this framework into my undergraduate courses to really drive engagement and relevance for students as well.
Cool, thank you. So, is this working? Is that me?
Yep.
Okay, you've changed it.
Yep.
Thank you. So, our course has been a bit of a success, and I don't know if Jenny's really given up as much detail as she could have into kind of some of the things that we've achieved through this course, but we've won a digital teaching citation on the back of it, some of the highest student retention out of any of the courses in the college, and also fantastic evaluations from the students too. And we really wanted to carry this winning formula into something else. And so that's kind of the question that we had to try and answer. At the end of last year, we found out another course that we were teaching called Information Skills was no longer going to be tethered to another course called University Studies, which is a foundations program. And after having a mid-course crisis and freaking out about this for a little bit, we came to the realization that we could re-tether this course called Information Skills to our other course, Digital Literacy. And in doing that, we actually rebranded one of our courses from Information Skills into Future Ideas. And what we're trying to do is continue this method, this approach, and show that it doesn't just work in one course, and as Beck's shown, it can work in multiple courses, and actually testing ourselves in one of our other subjects that already needed a bit of help and change anyway. And so one of the main things that we're focusing on in Future Ideas is actually working to continue to develop those 21st century skills that Binkley talks about. And we've developed a couple of strategies, including using Quantext, which is a learning management system that allows students to contribute during lectures. We've also tried something really new this semester where we're not sure if we're calling it hive mind or crowdsourcing, but we're actually allowing students, instead of just contributing to assignments together, they're actually working together to do quizzes together, and letting them realise that working together, they can get better results, but also better knowledge, better information. And we've tested this out and gone from individually, they're getting about 60%, 70% on most of these quizzes to 100%, in nearly every class for nearly every group in quizzes.
Okay, I'll just clarify, they do it individually, and I think my mic's on, yeah. They do the quiz individually with the questions, then they come in and then they discuss the questions, then they collectively in a group of 4 respond to the same questions. So it's problem-based assessment using learning catalytics. So then we've seen that jump from individual to, once they negotiate as a group, consensus building and collective intelligence. So.
Said it a lot better than I could have. So, and then the third strategy we've been trying out this semester as well is something called Lego Serious Play that Chad Habel's actually shown us how to do. And I'll kind of give you a bit of a rundown of what it is. And Chad, you can pick me up if I get any of this wrong. But it draws upon experiential learning. And it actually was used by Lego's own management for problem solving when they had a bit of a crisis of their own. And what it's ideally useful for is it's excellent for overcoming barriers that result from organisational hierarchies or cultural language differences. Thanks, Chad. But also the really cool thing is it actually pairs with Binkley's idea of facilitating 21st century thinking. It employs creativity and innovation, involves critical thinking, problem solving and decision making, and learning to learn, and that metacognition of understanding your own learning processes. And I'll show you some examples of kind of what the students have been doing. So this is, in context, it all makes sense, I promise. This is Kayla trying to conceptualize, what are my notes here? The profit motive and environmentalism. And then we have, this is White and Garcia working towards discussing ethics in AI. I think this is kind of the matrix that they've made through Lego models. And then we've also got Jennifer and Matt developed their own kind of design for sustainable food production. And in doing this, what students actually do is they go through a process of asking a question, then they have to build either the question itself or some kind of attempt at answering it to some degree, and then they're asked to share. And this kind of in a way ties in with that kind of that universal design learning, is that students are actually able to access sharing through their own experience and their own understanding, actually demonstrating their abstract ideas in practical terms. And it also allows them to offer up some kind of practical solutions to what might be abstract problems. And so kind of in reflection, we've found that it offers value to social sciences by allowing students to create concrete solutions to abstract problems. It facilitates teamwork and respect across diverse language and culture groups, which is something that we face in the college, having a large community of very diverse groups of people. Encourages students to actually reflect on their practice, not just do, but think back in the moment, not waiting till weeks later to get feedback on ideas. Allows students an opportunity to develop confidence in sharing and discussing their ideas, which students don't necessarily get a lot of opportunities to do within the classroom. And also it continues our approach to learning that we've developed in digital literacies, which is why I think this has been a successful approach. And with that in mind, I'm going to hand you back to Jenny. Thanks. You need the clicker and you've got that.
I've got a mic. Cool. All right. I'll just quickly go through our last section here, which is about outcomes. So some of the things that have been fantastic have been the amount of attention that this course has generated as a model example of course teaching digital literacy, and the ways we can then work with new students in this way that's very relevant to them. So you can see a couple of UniSA news stories there. An example where we did a showcase at Ascolite where the students had their work on iPad minis and then shared them with tertiary educators, and that was also supported by the TIU, shared on the UniSA Facebook. And what I really love about this is the real pride you can see from the students that they've become these digital producers and that they're happy to share their work. We won a 2017 citation for digital learning, which was fantastic acknowledgement, but particularly that this is about empowering students as digital citizens and producers. In terms of the outcomes, Cam's touched on a couple of these, so I'll just go quickly through. We've really seen this enhances participation and engagement, so above average retention and pass rate, which particularly in enabling programs which are open access, this is a challenge that we're working with. We see outstanding course evaluations, so particularly people talking about enjoying the assessment tasks and that challenge and add that element of choice and the types of positive challenges. This is the type of, for people that aren't familiar with the UniSA dashboard, this is agree and then neutral, so you can see how strongly students agree and how positive they feel about the course in student feedback, and we are significantly outstanding the type of feedback we get from students, which I think really shows how meaningful the course is to them. And they also get new perspectives about the role of digital literacy, whichever career and discipline area they're going on towards. I know we've given a lot of examples today from creative industries, but there are a lot of students who do things like create fitness apps and go on to health sciences, or create websites for sales purposes and go on to business, or different areas as well. You'll see those in the video. Just again, a few comments from students about how they find the course, and I particularly like this quote at the top, not just because it's so glowing, but that it's showing the student connect this with the area they're planning on working in. So as a hopefully eventual teacher, this course opened my eyes to how advanced everything has become and how much it will affect the way education works. It was both inspirational and educational for me, and I loved it. So a lot of really positive feedback from students. So 3 key points and takeaways from this, and I guess the key message we hope to share today is that by using these deliberate design principles, we can create courses that support all students to achieve more from their studies. So this course shows developing a course with UDL principles, assist students to access and engage with concepts from a broad range of disciplines. And while we use digital technology as the device, they bring in the both their background knowledge and the area they're planning on going towards, which helps us shape that final product with them. Embedding technology in individual choice is empowering and enjoyable for the students. We use a constructivist approach and we connect with their funds of knowledge and respect what they bring. And this helps support transition to the university environment too. And as students become familiar with complex ideas and language from diverse fields of knowledge, they build confidence, which is really important, and it helps them create industry standard digital content, and that prepares them for 21st century careers and citizenship. So there are references in a tiny font. And just a final version of the QR code if you did want to check out the 2017 showcase. This is an annual event of student work that we're really proud to share the types of work that they do. And hopefully we now have time for questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so maybe if you could take off the lapel and you guys could answer the questions. So, do we have any questions in the room? While they're waiting for you to think of a question, I'd like to ask Levi, why did the heart attack having a heart attack, why was it wearing a Walkman?
I thought they should be going for a jog or something in the park. That's
okay. Okay, it's the jog that induced the heart attack.
Yeah.
Okay, a question? A question from the room. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Bridget. I'm an OED, online educational designer. I just had a question whether there was a difference between the online cohort that you had and the internal cohort, whether there was a difference in what they produced or how much they engaged.
Well, originally this course has been taught only internally, so from next year it will be available externally. So it'll be interesting to see. We're really keen to ensure that the external students have the same experience, but at the moment it's only the virtual lecture that's an online component, and all of the tutorials are taught on campus. For the virtual lecture though, I've deliberately designed it in ways that are more sympathetic or designed for the online environment, so it's often lecturettes and then with learning catalytics questions, so the students are still having that interactive experience. And I have done some analysis of the student use of those tools, and it's quite high. It's not that they're ignoring the lecture and just coming to class, they're actually doing the interactive tasks, so they're well prepared.
Thanks. A question from online for local UniSA people. Do we have any software available to all UniSA students, like animation or podcast software? Do we know?
Levi might be a good one for that. We have Office 360, but I don't think that has animation.
Yeah, all the students have access to Adobe Creative Cloud. That has software in certain courses, everyone. Very important. Yeah, but if for those who do have access to it, that has Adobe After Effects and Adobe Animate and also Photoshop. They all have the ability to animate. And yeah, Creative Cloud seems to be the way to go.
But it's not in every course. So check your courses.
Now, I'll just quickly add to that. So our Creative Cloud, the deal with that is that you can we have the university has an enterprise license. So you just need your course coordinators to work with IT to get your course enterprise licensing. Then the students can download the software from home, and it gives them access to all of the Adobe Cloud. So they can use Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, whatever they want to use, just using their UniSA logon. But yeah, course coordinators will need to liaise with IT to get their students added to the list. I've got no idea, that's above my pay grade.
Thank you. The first speaker spoke about bring your own devices in lectures. That sounds like a great idea. Could Jenny give examples of them doing this? Or do they do?
Yeah, I guess what we've deliberately tried to do is to incorporate the technologies students have with them into the learning. So part of what we try and do from the first lecture is to look at how they can use those effectively. So particularly learning catalytics is a tool that we use. In the second lecture of the course this year, I also used Padlet and encouraged students to use their own devices to share uni hacks, because it was their second week of being at university. So how do you kind of survive and flourish in the university environment? And it basically turned into like Tumblr or Reddit within a couple of minutes. Like, it was just hugely populated, but included things like pug dogs dressed as unicorns and a thread about Daleks. So one thing I would say is bring your own device is great, but do be aware that you encourage some chaos by creating, if you have an open space. Most of the bring your own device though is very much that interactive audience engagement, so using learning catalytics both for capturing student ideas, for getting them to respond to questions about key content, so testing their knowledge in a rapid way, and also we'll use it for things like in the lecture, one of the lectures on creativity, then getting them to work through some creative idea generation, which is then shared instantaneously. And it really helps as a lecturer for you to then be able to gauge how the students are, I guess, how effectively they are taking on the information. So if they're answering correctly, and usually about every 10 minutes or so, I'll incorporate questions. If they're answering them all correctly, you can move forward. If some seem to be struggling, you can then explain the concepts in greater detail.
Thank you. Is there any additional prep in digital literacies for students who are entering the program with very low levels of digital literacy or ICT experience before they commence?
Yep. We do say that as a prerequisite that they should have basic IT knowledge, so they should be comfortable with emailing, using the web, using word processing. If students are not at that level, then there's a course called Introductory Computing or Applied Computing Practices. Sorry, I'm looking at another lecturer to check because the name changed this year, which helps prepare them with some of those more introductory information technology skills. If students do have that basic level, then we help scaffold them, and we will have all sorts of different skill levels. We've had people come in before, say with a Cert 3 in information technology, who then want to code their website from scratch and use HTML or CSS, whatever else. And that then perhaps sitting next to someone who's come in as a mature age student who, I'm thinking of a particular student here, who didn't feel so comfortable with digital technology, but then actually used that as a tool for investigation and created a short film documentary where she interviewed her children as well as her mother and talked about generational change in digital technology use. So we help shape students' learning journey based on the skill level they come in with.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first question is, how much of this work takes into consideration the contextual elements of digital literacies that Belshaw talked about, where it depends on what context it's sat in as to what digital literacy is? In other words, certain subjects within the universities will demand or will certainly have a nod towards requiring or wanting students to have certain digital literacy in certain areas. And the other question I have, which is completely different, is has there been any work done with secondary schools or TAFE or any of that sector to actually improve digital literacy at that level?
Those are quite different questions. I'll try and do justice to them, but if anyone else on the team wants to chip in, I'm not so familiar with Belch's work, but certainly what we do with each of the students when they're creating their pitch, we encourage them to think about the discipline that they're going towards and what may be relevant for that space. So everyone is creating a digital project. That's a key requirement, but it may be, say, if it's a student that's going on to an area where they may not need as perhaps complex digital literacies for their work, then they may use something like Wix or Weebly to generate a website, and it's more about the content that's within the site and what they're creating, but they still have to create a functional website as a result of that, whereas perhaps a student going on to an information technology degree or media arts or something like that, where there are quite strong demands, they would often be aiming for something that's a bit more technologically driven. Does anyone else have? Yeah.
I guess also with your digital literacies, you have both like the practical element in which you're learning to use tools, but there's also the social element too. And the social element is far more broadly applicable to our students and something we spend probably more time actually talking about and discussing. And then we kind of allow them to pursue their own practical skills, and that's based on their own entry to the course, based on that, how much they actually know about certain tools and how it works. So some have got excellent programming skills, some don't. But they all end up towards the end with a similar idea of kind of the social context of this technology anyway.
Even sociological analysis as well of how these things are shifting society and how to manage that as well. Some of you may have seen I've been in the media a bit lately discussing things like social media use. So that comes from that too. And then the second part of that question, I haven't personally done a lot of work with secondary schools or TAFE. I'd be very interested in making some connections. I have presented at some different symposia and then talked to people as a result of that around things like learning analytics and different tools being used, but haven't. If anyone is out there and would like to discuss what's happening in those spaces, I'd be very interested.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the room? One more. No, and introduce yourself.
Thanks. Thanks, Jennifer and team. Really interesting presentation. I teach in the communication management and PR world, and we're always telling our students don't jump to the tactics. We've got to develop the strategy first. What do you do as far as that back end is concerned? Because it's great having an infographic about plastics or whales or whatever, but if it's not serving a particular purpose, it's a waste of everyone's time and effort. So what do you do to contextualise that for them?
I think part of that comes in their pitch where they need to discuss audience, and so we try to encourage them to think about means of dissemination. How will they strategically share what they create with the relevant audience? I'm thinking, for example, and it's another example around plastics, but a student who constructed a website which was around community groups that collect plastic from beaches, and then the social media channels he was planning on connecting with to share that information with an existing community.
I think that important part of the pitch for them is to explain to us why it's a good idea. So not only who is the audience, but why is this a project worth doing? So that's where they start to think about, how am I actually going to deliver something that's worthwhile and that is good quality. So they have to explain to us why the project's worth doing, and also how are they going to achieve good outcomes. So that's all part of the planning process.
Hi, thanks. Adding on to that, I'm from School of Marketing, Business School, Margaret Faulkner. My question was right at the start, you talked about as an assessment or in things that they do peer review. And given they're all doing such vastly different things and they're quite new, how do you sort of give them skills to actually do peer review other than, oh, that looks good and I like it? Like, is there something you're doing there I just thought maybe we could incorporate?
Yeah, I think this comes down to having a universal design learning rubric, and so what I've done in designing the assessments is made clear rubrics. So regardless of the project type, there are certain things we're looking to see. So for example, in the pitch, things around design, around merit of concept, around professional communication. Then what happens in each tutorial, each student has like a shortened version of that rubric and needs to respond to 3 other students' presentations. So they're then looking at the criteria, what makes an F2, what makes a credit, what makes an HD, and they're giving some feedback on that. So we take the grading with a little bit of a grain of salt in the peer review because we know that they're new to the space, but it forces them to look at the criteria, to assess others, give feedback on it, and then they all get some peer feedback as well that's incorporated into their pitch feedback.
Thank you very much. There are no more questions. We'll give a big round of applause for our speakers. And thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And thanks everyone for coming online, and we'll see you next time.